So, missing the paradox, dwelling, anxiety, depression, getting stuck in life, missing the paradox. That's what we're going to talk about today, right? I think I finally got it, connected the dots, right? You know, as intuitive feelers, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when someone asks you, hey, what do you feel when you walk into a room? When you walk into a space,
yes.
Let's say you walk into a room, what's the first thing you start to think about?
About the energy. Yes, this will be the first. Is it positive energy? Will I be able to stay in the spot for a long time, or I will say, I will leave after 1 hour. Yeah. Is it the stressful? You can totally see it about some persons who will sit down with their hands closed, so he will not be able to communicate, to open conversations or something. Yeah. Or you can see the person who will just stand and say, the funny jokes and stuff, and you will feel it immediately. Will you be able to stay in this space, or you want it to leave?
That's right. You feel energies, right? But it's not necessarily that you feel them, you see them, right? To our senses. I mean, if you were behind a closed door, you wouldn't be able to feel the energies of a room. You wouldn't know. You'd have to be there observing them, right? Seeing with your eyes, right? Based on what you've seen before, reading current events, and you connect the dots. So, where are we today? If we're connecting the dots.
They have no alternatives. They never experience anything else. Their face-to-face interactions are very limited, if at all. Families have disintegrated, don't forget. We are talking about generations which also, concurrent with the experience of social media, lost all other social experience. People who are 40, 50 years old experience the extended family.
Yeah.
So the nuclear family, grandfathers, grandmothers, and uncles, and so on. People who are 20, 30 years old experienced only the nuclear family. And people who are 15 to 25 years old experience no family whatsoever, statistically speaking.
Right.
40% of them grew with single mothers, and about 70 to 80% of them come from divorced families. So the lack of all other social interactions and all other social dimensions makes it impossible for them to compare, to develop critical thinking about what they're experiencing, to realize the limitations and problems of social media, and so on and so forth. Social media is the only social world they know. They have no family, they have nothing else to compare it with, and also because they are not intermeshed, because they are not embedded in other types of social interactions, social units, there's also no control.
Yeah.
There's no control over the usage of social media. This movement of controlling the usage of social media is very new. It's about 2 years old. Only now we're beginning to talk about limiting access to tablets and smartphones, smartphone-free hours, tailoring the use of social media to age groups, etc., etc. But even this control is rudimentary and utterly ineffective. There's no way to control the use of cyberspace. And you can find children as young as 9-year-old or 10-year-old who are self-mutilating online, who are joining suicide cults and death cults, who are exposed to extreme violent pornography, and so on and so forth.
We are at a space where statistics has shown that people are marrying later in life. Marriages are crumbling at a faster pace than previous times, due to various reasons. But nonetheless, with people around my age and older, they had a core, right, of family members that extended beyond their immediate core. Okay, so for me, I had grandparents, my great grandparents, my great grandmother died in 2010. Still have my grandfather. I have great aunts, plenty of cousins. So my family extends from both sides of the family, just way out there. Then you move on to the more recent generations. You have the core family, where it's limited to the immediate and partial extended family members, right? Like maybe a couple uncles, aunts, siblings, and so forth. And now more recently, we're realizing that it's just the immediate family, and more often just one parent. So as a result now, people, amongst other factors, are feeling more lonely, not having others to turn to guide them, to provide them that sense of understanding of how to navigate, through life. So I've had plenty of my uncles who were always mentoring me, whether I liked it or not, but they were present. They would always ask me, hey, what are you doing with your life? What are you doing this? I would sway a different direction. They would always be there. Hey, you need to, what have you. But now we're sort of getting away from that, right? So what's happening? Okay, I'm connecting the dots now, right? It's like a DJ said. I'm just extending, that's it, right? Painting a picture. So now, we now know often that teens tend to rely heavily on social media, right?
It reminds me that there are groups of people who live inside multiplayer games.
Yes.
They absolutely live there.
Yes, yeah.
These games have money of their own. You can buy all kinds of merchandise and goods and so on and so forth. And so when you talk to these people, and I did, when you talk to these people, they try very much to pretend that they're in reality, but they're not. They're absolutely not. They live much more there, inside the computer, than outside the computer. So how would we relate to these people? We don't even have the common background.
So now, what do you think happens when the intuitive feeler walks in to the space now where people gather, which is the internet, forums, right? We no longer have people who we can discuss these issues with in the real world. So we go into the digital world, online forums, to seek others who are like us, to provide us perspective, right? What happened is that we have now a sense of, I'm feeling the energy, I'm feeling what it is that I felt before. I relate. Now, it can be a good thing, because then if you are experienced, if you have life experience, you can navigate and better understand and better provide context, perspective to those who are seeking knowledge. But then sometimes we get caught up in this space by where we become one, because we no longer want to be different from those of who we share this space with. So as a result, then we just become part of it.
And my only conclusion with this, again, no proof, it's just sort of a hypothesis, is that a lot of this actually came out of the forms and communities that had formed up around the idea itself. The nature of these sorts of communities, the creation of the echo chambers and their validation and reassurance of ideas, which in turn sort of insulates the community even further, does seem to have some seriously nasty side effects, which we're increasingly notice as polarization between left and right and polarization between differing ideas continues to grow. The entrenchment of one's belief system has become something that is almost sacred, and as sacred as the ideas themselves, not really facilitating much in the way of open discussion or debate, let alone a refining of understanding or finding of common ground between polar opposites to begin with.
So we miss the paradox in that while in real world we can walk into a room and feel the energies, it's the same thing that we can walk into an internet forum and also feel the energies. And that's what happened to me, and I didn't realize what was going on. I mean, I knew, I felt it, but I didn't understand. I didn't have that perspective. It just dawned on me, because again, doing research, trying to figure things out. Why? But here is the true paradox, in that I was reading a comment on a video, and the video was with Joe Rogan speaking to an individual who was going through some of his own issues. He reminds me of Breezy INFP, actually, just an older version of Breezy INFP.
Someone was telling me, like, if a snake doesn't successfully shed its skin, it dies. And that, so a person is the same way, in the sense that many of us cling to ways that we were, thinking that's who we still are, when we're not.
Yes.
And you have to learn what parts of yourself to let go of, like, and you have to have the guts to fucking let go of it. And dude, that is one of the craziest things, when you really have a thing that you've become attached to. For a lot of people, it's a relationship that sucks. You end up in a bad relationship, a bad job. You end up just attached to some version of yourself that you just aren't anymore. That's not who you are.
Right.
You got to let go of that.
You got to let go of it.
And letting go of it is death. It's a form of death. It feels like death. And so people want to avoid it. And what ends up happening is you run into people who are just fucking don't even realize that they're valets, covered in bags from all these they're hoarders, and they won't let go of all these things, all these ways they used to be. So that's the what I've learned, is that through this act of like scanning the self or looking into the self, you'll find places where you're stuck.
And as he discussed, he says, hey, listen, at the time that you were, chastising me, and, well, playfully, but you were telling me to pick myself up, I was resistant to that. And it is now that I understand that your way of doing it, right, your delivery, from a place of good, really helped me.
When we're riding in my fucking Mini Cooper and I'm trying to listen to Elliott Smith, and I'm depressed, and you're like, dude, what are you listening to? What the fuck are you listening to? I'll never forget that. And I'll tell you, man, in my head, I'm like, what a dick. You know what I mean?
I was definitely being a dick.
Yeah, but what that was like, it was what you were doing is helping me, like, get out of that vibration that I was
You
in.
were wallowing in it.
Yes. And I needed I didn't, in those moments when you were doing that shit, I was like in my head resisting. And I'm like, when you get around someone who's like a teacher figure like you, or you get around someone who's like really doing it from love and not trying to fucking like fuck with you, because that can happen too.
That's the worst.
Or be superior to you or whatever.
Right.
Like
put you down and
put you down.
Yeah.
When you get around somebody who's like doing it out of love, there is such a massive difference in the way that feels.
And when I went on to the comment section, what really struck me, or what really motivated me to make this video and to provide this perspective and to bring it all together, is that individual said, if I were to watch this video, I would have been resistant to Joe Rogan's delivery, to the whole entire video. But after having gone through different therapists, different people who guided me, I have come to terms with the fact that I was selfish. And that while I was dwelling, coping with my own personal issues, I was doing this in the presence of others who were also finding themselves. Yet I was being selfish and not realizing that my actions, my dwelling was contagious.
Fuck it, man. You can't do that. You can't do that. Well, you can. But, but it's not the healthiest way to go. That's going to give people around you and you yourself the most joy. It's not necessarily selfish. It's self-indulgent for sure. I don't necessarily think it's selfish. I think it's just it's a pattern of behavior that you can get trapped in. And I think we've all been in bad situations where you just feel like shit. Like you get in a pattern of behavior and you feel trapped. But you gotta learn from other people who have been through those patterns and learn from your own experiences getting through patterns.
And for those who actually wanted to progress, who understood their place, understood who they were and what was going on, but they wanted to find a better space, it was difficult for them because, again, we miss the paradox in that we feel for others. We feel the need to bend over our backs and to help others, you know, and not care for ourselves. And so we miss the paradox in that we don't look out for others who are trying to better themselves, because then once we become in this space, they now take on the chore of helping us. And then together we end up in this space of everyone helping each other.
It's the same thing with these groups. If you're in these groups and you're literally there for support, they will become negative and chipping away at you until you're like, well, fuck it. You know, they did this in the group and 10 people, 20 people, 30 people did this, so I'm going to do it. Fuck it. I'm just not going to do it as bad. It makes it okay and teaches you that failure is okay. Failure is part of the process, but failure is not the goal. That group, that support group, that forum, whatever it is about health. It's about fitness. What happens in these groups is one person says, well, you know, I messed up my diet. I did this, this, and this. And they laugh about it. And they'll say stuff like, you know what? Oh, well, it is what it is, whatever. Well, what happens is another person jumps in and says, oh, well, that's okay because, you know, last week I did this. I ate a whole chocolate cake and I binged for 3 days and I vomited. Like, I'm reading things and it's like they have eating disorders, poor association, poor relationships with food. I'm like, what the fuck? And when they get together, all it does is make for a melting pot or a perfect storm of people to support one another's failures as well as eating disorders and inappropriate relationships with food.
Johnny Fontana, Real World, and Scorpio, we out.